Off top, in order to procreate, male anglerfish fuse themselves to the body of female anglerfish, giving their lives becoming an extra appendage. It's kind of weird. Play music.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.
All right, welcome to the Domonique Foxworth Show. We are being joined today by the great writer at ESPN.com, formerly of 538, also author of Blood in the Garden, a great book that you see behind him on his shelf, and you should buy it and order it. I don't care whether you read it or not. I don't, at least. Just make sure you buy it. Get that man his money. Welcome to the show, bud.
Thanks, man. Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor.
Before the show, we had some talk about all this stuff going on around men's and women's basketball specifically, and it's just gotten to a fevered pitch that we are not going to address here today. It's just weird, but we're going to talk about but we're going to talk about the NBA. Charlie, where you want to start?
Thank God the final starts in 2 days. I think we can all agree on that. We're just very happy for some high-level NBA basketball. But the question I wanted to ask for you guys is there's a lot at stake in this series. We have great players like Luka Doncic, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Kyrie Irving. Teams have been really successful. But we have two superstars who have had different levels of praise despite leading their teams to the finals. And I want to ask you guys, who do you think has more at stake in this series, Luka or Tatum?
I would say Tatum without question here. I think a lot of that when you win your conference by 14 games, when you've been to the finals, the conference finals, at least that round 6 out of the last 8 years, you've consistently been a first team all NBA performer. This has kind of been the expectation. This is what you make certain trades for. You trade your team captain, Marcus Smart, to go get somebody like Porzingis. I think this is kind of, it culminates to this. And I think that from that standpoint, they're going to be the team facing the pressure. They're the team that this has kind of been easy for them. They haven't faced really any true number one option from any of these teams yet for a whole series. And so I think between that, the amount of rest they had, everything else, they're going to be expected to win this series. And I kind of feel like if they don't close the deal here, it's going to become a question of will they ever get one, which we're pretty early in the life cycle, just looking at contractually where this team is, how old their key players are, at least with Tatum and Brown. Yeah. But it starts to get late pretty early when you've had this many opportunities and don't close the deal.
So I think you're absolutely right. My instinct is to go with them also, and it's in part because I think that they had a lot of success really early, and the times that they've lost, they lost in the finals with what I thought was a better team. They lost in the conference final with what I thought was against a team that was worse than them. Again, they're in a situation where they're in a series with a team that I think is not as good as them, and all the eyes are going to fall on Jason Tatum, and he's going to get labeled with that can't win the big one, which I think is fair to not have stuck him with that up until now because he's been young. But it's probably not fair to stick him with it after this. But if they lose, it's hard to avoid it because that's going to be the looming question. He's going to be in one of those situations where no matter what you do in the regular season, it's not going to matter. He's going to get himself in a situation where all we're going to talk about, and Harden's probably not the perfect example, but I remember Harden and Embiid are the guys that I feel like fall in the category where we're going to put Jason Tatum, which will be unfair, but it'll be like
if Embiid got out of the second round.
Yeah, but it's still, the point is, you just like taking shots at Embiid. I'm surprised you haven't found a way to on my man Kevin Durant, which I'm sure the podcast is young. I'm sure you'll find a way to do that at some point.
No.
But the point is, that's where he is. So I think it is important, since I think we all agree, unless, Charlie, you think that Luka is under more pressure?
Can I have a total middleman take, which is the coward's take. I think that Luka has more.
Chris will like that. Chris is an author. He is a smart guy who likes to think through things. I'm out here hot taking, baby.
This is how I actually feel. I think that Luka has more to gain and Jason Tatum has more to lose. I think if Luka wins the finals, it becomes this really hyped up person. He's 25. He's made 5 first-team All-NBAs. He is probably the only person with a legitimate shot at approaching LeBron's all-time scoring record. He's going to have every number, and he's close enough to Jokic at the top of the league that we can probably crown him as the guy, if not now, the next guy, even if he gets caught by Wemby before he gets there. With Tatum, the pressure is on what if he loses? Because I don't think, unless he has an out-of-body experience, I doubt we're going to leave the series thinking Jason Tatum's the best basketball player alive. But obviously, he'll have all the accolades. It's really important if he wins, but we will crush him if he loses.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I agree with all that.
Oh, great. I didn't middleman it too much. That's nuance.
You laid it out perfectly. We can go into the next one.
Okay, well, there is part of this because I think that based on the pressure that we're feeling about the Celtics, it's because a lot of people think that they're the better team and should win the series. And this was actually something that Bill Simmons pointed out on his podcast, that the Mavs are the third biggest finals underdogs in the last 40 years. That says a lot about them being a 5 seed that made the finals, but it also says a lot about how good the Celtics team has really been in their 64-win season. Chris, does that make sense to you? Does this feel like this is one of the third biggest mismatch in our lifetime in the finals?
No, and I can honestly say I think the Mavericks may very well win the series. I have them winning the series right now, so I don't quite agree with the idea that they're that big of an underdog. I think that what makes this a strange situation is really the Mavericks have not had this team for very long. They, even Kyrie has not really been part of the team for all that long when you really consider it. But then you look at Gafford, Lively as a rookie. You've got PJ Washington, who's been a big contributor to this team, a team that really was not good defensively, and over the last 20 games of the season ranked as the best defense in basketball. So, I think that, they're also one of the few teams seeded 5 or lower that's made the NBA Finals really ever. So from all those standpoints, they should be an underdog, but they knocked off a very good, granted young, Oklahoma City team. They didn't really have much trouble in this last round against Minnesota. Took a pretty bad off night from Luka and Kyrie, and a really great game from Towns and Edwards to beat them. So I don't think they should be viewed as massive underdogs. We're talking about all the questions we have about Boston, about needing to prove it against top-level competition. They really didn't have that coming out of the East. They've kind of, to me, looked like they've coasted. They've still won games by plenty of points, but it has looked as if they've been bored to me, and that they really don't push themselves until they're forced to, instead of just, shutting the door emphatically, which I think the way we'd like to see them do. I think the decision-making is fair to question it sometimes, about Tatum. I think that's one of the reasons that, for me, to what you said about it being an out-of-body experience for him to have to kind of take that crown of best player in the world, I don't see it happening in this series. But part of it is a decision-making thing of, I trust Luka when the game is on the line consistently to kind of emphatically just say, I'm doing this, I'm taking over. And for Tatum, oftentimes that is kind of an ill-advised step back jumper, despite the fact that he's been killing a team by going to the basket repeatedly. He can do it. It's more a question of is he going to? And, sort of the same thing with Kyrie and Luka. I kind of trust that with them a little bit more. There's a ton of things that go into this series that could make it interesting. There's a ton of things that I think, quite frankly, Boston could win the series a lot more easily than what I'm projecting. Right. But I still think that there's a very cogent argument here that Dallas could win the series, and again, in my opinion, I think they probably will win the series.
Yeah, he said that earlier. It's twice he snuck that hot take in there. You didn't.
Hey man,
you said right now I have them. Right now I have them winning.
I got them at 6. I'm gonna be real. I got them at 6.
But you said right now I have them. It's different. That's like I might change my mind before the 6. It's not a full commitment.
That's an expert takes.
I sent my email in to our editors at ESPN when they asked for how many games and which team do you have winning and who do you have as MVP. I picked Luka as the MVP. I picked Dallas in 6, figuring that they would get it done on the road, at home as opposed to the road. But I'm sticking with it at this point. I'm kind of locked in because I already sent in my.
That was one. That was one of several interesting things that you said in that. The other thing that popped out is I'll get back to Charlie's question in a second. But the other thing that popped out to me is something that I hadn't thought of. And one of the main criticisms of the Celtics before they got to the playoffs was their performance in the clutch. They've shown. In particular this last series, that they are quite comfortable in that situation. But oftentimes in recent history in the NBA, it comes down to, no matter how good the teams are, it comes down to those final minutes. And you brought something up that I hadn't really considered, and it's kind of who you trust more in those final moments. And it hit me like, yeah, obviously, I think we all go Luka right there. And then the second question is, do you go Tatum or Kyrie? And I guess Kyrie has big shots in his career, and he's been, last 5, 6, 7 years, not really been doing too much in the playoffs or doing too much in the NBA generally. But still, we have that one shot in those series with the Cavs to look back on that hit lots of really big shots. Not that Tatum hasn't, but it's just an interesting concept because rarely do you have the two like best clutch performers on the same team.
Yeah, it's really interesting with it because I feel the same way.
Yeah,
I feel the same way watching Luka and Kyrie. Like they can walk people down to their spots and score or get the shot they want seemingly on every possession. But the thing that's interesting to me is by every metric, Boston has a historic offense. Right. By every metric, their offense has been better than Dallas's even after Dallas installed this new starting five. And by every normal metric besides our eye test, Jason Tatum is like a bona fide playoff killer, whether it's the 50-point closeout games or all the successes he's had to bring them here. And so I wonder, do we just trust them more because of the eye test, or is Dallas's offense actually progressing to something that's on the level of Boston's?
What do you think, Chris?
Well, I think it's interesting because, I think most people, the vast majority of people would say that Luka is certainly offensively is a better player than Tatum, just hands down. I think that he's trusted more in those situations. He's a better passer than Jason Tatum. He's bigger, at least just I think even height-wise, he's maybe a little bit taller, right around the same height as Jason Tatum. He's a bigger guy. He's kind of more of a load to deal with from that standpoint. Maybe not the burst that Tatum has, but all the other things I think kind of tilt in Luka's favor. And I think that, you mentioned the 50-point closeout. We also remember watching Tatum kind of have fourth quarters where he's just non-existent or he's not playing well, and then he just kind of ignites out of nowhere. You would prefer that to him not showing up at all, but I just think that this was the difference in the Minnesota series, right? Of Minnesota's clutch offense was not good during the regular season. Dallas's, you knew what you were getting because you had two elite scorers and guys that could really, really pass the ball with a ton of spacing. And I know for me, that's kind of what sent me over the edge here to go with Dallas, is that they just, Luka just makes some passes sometimes that don't look like they should be possible. And I think that it makes it impossible to guard him because if you decide to throw a second body at him, he's going to find the guy that left in order to double. If you bring a second body at him from a help position, then Luka is going to find. I mean, Lively did not miss a shot last series. Going back to the series before that, he had a couple games where he had not missed a shot either. He's made like his last 20 shots because lobs are available. So I think what we haven't talked about yet, like Kristaps Porzingis and his return is going to be massive for them. I don't feel like he spoke all that confidently about what he'd be able to give. He said that he's feeling better every day. He's going to give it a go. He hasn't really played hard
Hold on, Chris.
and not in a scrimmaging sort of way. That matters in this series. And part of the reason that, again, I can't in good conscience say like they're just hands down favorites in this series. Like we haven't seen them full strength in weeks, and they haven't played their very best in a while.
I want to get to the Kristaps stuff too, but I want to at least give me a chance to talk about the offensive comparisons because I think that matters. And I think part of it is when we watch the Celtics offense, and it might just be that we've been trained to think about offense and basketball in a certain way for much of our lives. And that Celtics offense, as great as it is, when there is a holdup, because they're such a talented team, when there is an issue with the number one player, they just kick it to the open guy, or they'll have someone else initiate the offense because they got three guys that can initiate offense in clutch situations. And that is not what we're accustomed to. Part of the reason why Dallas's offense is not actually better but looks better is because last series we watched Luka just solve problems. Him and Kyrie just solve. You try to throw a double at Kyrie, he splits it. And you watch that happen and you're like, damn, these guys are unstoppable. When you look at the Celtics, they are, I was going to say equally, but they're more unstoppable statistically, but it looks a little bit less like dominant, less like what we're accustomed to, even with the Warriors, where you would still see, even if it wasn't Curry hitting the shots, you'll still see and feel the gravity created by Curry. And it just doesn't quite feel the same when you watch the Celtics, which isn't fair, but it's also kind of like the Tim Duncan-ish, like Spurs type situation where it's like, this shit is effective, but it don't look like what we want it to look like. So we kind of discount it a little bit. Whereas the the Mavericks, that looks like what I like. I mean, pulling from the sticker and hitting no-look passes behind the back to the corner, and Kyrie doing art on the floor with the ball in his hands. Like, that feels special.
They don't have many possessions where you can't, and like I'm absolutely cribbing this, kind of parroting this from Zach Lowe when I did his podcast recently. The Mavericks rarely have possessions where you can't at least see what they're trying to do.
Right.
Boston doesn't have a ton of those possessions either. Like you mentioned that they've got 3 guys that can create some offense. They've arguably got 4 from the standpoint of Tatum, Brown, Derek White.
Yeah.
Is maybe the best role player. I would argue that he's closer to graduating to star status than he is really a role player, even if we don't think about it in the traditional way. And by the way, Drew Holiday's been an all-star before. And by the way, Kristaps Porzingis led the league in post-up efficiency this year. So really all 5 of their guys are very capable of creating a basket, or at least creating some offense if need be. But again, it's like, how much do you trust those guys? We've talked about Brown. This is a good redemption opportunity for him. Obviously, he did that a little bit in the Indiana series and at moments in this last series. He was the conference finals MVP. But we've watched him struggle to dribble with his left hand before. And I think like you said, Domonique, I think we expect so much out of Boston sometimes because they have been so dominant. We expect them to just kind of put their foot on the throat of the opponent. And I could imagine that a lot of them, the players and everything, Mazzulla feels like, damn, we've done that. Like, we more or less
they lost 2 games
through the East.
Yeah,
they did, but it's like, also, you shouldn't be down 12, 13 points to these teams in the first place. So no matter how they do it, you finish damn near undefeated, and we're still going to want more. But I think it was that it looked like they were playing down to their level of competition until they really had to get it going. And I absolutely wonder that now that you're playing a team that looks worthy of the spot that they have as the Western Conference representative in the finals, with a guy that is at worst the 3rd best player in the world, at worst. And, maybe by the end of the series, we're talking about him being the best player in the world. It's a lot to kick it into gear against that when you've played what they've played so far. And it's a lot to kick it into gear when one of those guys that you're relying on has been out for the better part of a month, almost a month and a half at this point. So I'm very curious to see what it looks like. I think it'll be a great series. I'm curious to see what it looks like in terms of how Boston goes about doubling, blitzing. They hardly ever did that during the regular season. I got a stat from our stats team at ESPN. Their starting 5, when they were together as a unit, blitzed or doubled a total of 11 times this regular season. 2 of them were against Luka. They don't do it because they don't have to. They've got, the same way we talked about all these guys being really capable creators, they've got really good individual defenders on this team, most of whom have size.
Why you and Charlie out here taking Dallas where you don't have to? Like, it's I don't know. You guys are
the heart wants what the heart wants.
I think Luka is gonna have. I mean, they also didn't have much success guarding Luka 1-on-1 is the thing. So if you're gonna single guard him, good luck. Like we'll see what happens when you do bring that help or that second guy, which they're going to at some point. You can't guard Luka or Kyrie for that matter the same way game in, game out, play in, play out. And so to me, that's the biggest question that I'm wondering about as just an observer is what do those looks look like and who are they using? When do they use them? What are they basing that on? It was Jaylen Brown most of the season who got most of those looks against Luka, but Luka did just fine against him. So I'm very curious to see what it looks like.
So part of the reason we talked about this a little bit before the show, and I was trying to thread the coward's needle of saying that Luka was going to be the best player in the series and Kyrie was going to be the 3rd best player in the series. But you know what? I'm still going to pick Boston. And then I was like, Domonique was like, say it with your chest, say what you really believe. I know you want to pick Dallas. So we're going through history. And if it shakes out that way,
right,
if Luka's the best player in the series, if Kyrie outplays a Jaylen Brown or a Derek White or whoever ends up being the Celtics secondary option, depending on the series, it would be almost unprecedented for Boston to win. Like, it happened in 1998 in theory when Pippen had a bad back and Jordan beat Malone and Stockton. It happened in 1974.
Okay, now it's too
Exactly.
far.
Exactly. We're talking, but that's the point. Is like
Too
you have
far
to
back.
get back to Kareem and Oscar Robertson losing to Dave Cowens to the point that
That
like
didn't happen. I refuse to allow that to happen.
my point of when you were like, why are you going to end up picking the Mavs?
Yeah.
Because history, and I can't have the cognitive dissonance to say that this guy who's this good and playing this well, I'm not going to bet against.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I get what you're saying, but this, to the point of it being unprecedented, it's because it's like this whole run for the Mavs has been somewhat unprecedented, and a couple of series wins, I could admit that we were wrong. But the third one is like, okay, they're a real legitimate team. So it's fair for you to pick them. Like, obviously, I'm not saying it's crazy for you to pick them, but the difference between you and Chris, I think, in this is you are not making arguments for the Mavs to actually win. Like, you are making all the arguments for the Celtics to win, yet somehow you end up on, but Luka and Kyrie, though, which, like, it's not an argument.
Did you see the 20 points in the first quarter of Game 5?
I loved it. Him cussing at the sideline. It was magical. I loved every second of it. Oh man, this is a random tangent, but this morning I was on Get Up and I was doing much like Chris. I had books behind me, my whole setup, and one of my homeboys texted me and made me laugh on camera because he said, "You ain't reading none of them books behind you. You LeBron in all those books."
No.
He said, "I'm LeBron in the books." And it made me laugh because he was right. I think it was like 8 or 9 books behind me, and I think I read 2 of them cover to cover. The rest of them, I get to page 5 or 6 and then put them up there like I knocked them out the park. What's your percentage? What's your percentage on all those books behind you? Well, I know one of them you definitely read. What's the percentage?
One of them I wrote.
Yeah.
So I've had, you know what? I will be honest with you, Dom. Like I had to, like, I've never been a voracious reader. I could admit that, like, maybe since I was a kid. But when you're writing one or when you decide you're going to take on the responsibility, you have to, at least me, I had to read a lot of stuff. I read a ton of sports biographies before I wrote my own because I didn't want to look stupid. So I spent time kind of understanding how to craft and
Thomas. Big time does.
Like
a legitimate answer.
I also have a lot of friends on my on my
You don't
bookshelf,
read their books. Why you lie? You don't read their books.
No, don't do me like that. I started reading one of my friends last night that hasn't even come out because I want to do a blurb, and this is one of my best friends in the industry, so I'm reading hers, which will be on Hakeem. So I've read a lot of these. I will not lie and say I've read most of them, but I've read probably between 40% and half of them, and I've started a lot more than that. I've LeBron some of them too. Let's be honest.
We all got a
that.
Bron. Oh yeah, I'm the king of Bron in books, man. I'll start to a bunch of books.
But the one that LeBron did it with, let's keep it a buck. The autobiography of Malcolm X is one that I've read at least 5 or 6 times, and I've got more than 2 copies of it behind me because that's my favorite one of all time.
It's a must. He did big time a little bit. He's like, well, when you set off to write a whole damn book by yourself,
hey, man.
I'll read your book. If you write a book, I'll read it, Dominique.
Same to you, Charlie. If you write a book about all your disdain for Kevin Durant, I will definitely not read it.
I was going to compliment Tatum, and the stakes that I have for Tatum in this series is he actually can be on a Durantish path if they win this. 3 first-team All-NBAs, great scoring forward, elite two-way player, sort of trapped in the second-best forward of his generation, but I don't think we think about Tatum as like on a Durantish path yet because he has been more passive and less dominant of a scorer so far in his career. But I really think that's like the thing that could be.
It's funny though, because that's what I feel like that was the original comparison, right? Like he's a big scorer. Like Tatum Durant was the original comparison, and something happened where we kind of dropped Tatum back below the Durant trajectory, and now it seems like he is not on that trajectory, despite the fact that the numbers you just put up are ridiculous.
Part of it is 18 too, is for that first playoff run. He was such a knockdown shooter, and that's ebbed and flowed over the course of his career. He shot 52% on corner threes as a rookie, and I think 44% from everywhere on 3. And I think when you're that long and that smooth and you have that type of shooting stroke, it's hard not to make a Durant comparison.
I mean, we couldn't. If we were on It Is What It Is, I couldn't have let you get away with that. But anyway, Chris.
I think honestly what you just brought up, and it's in the weeds, and I think it's a lot sexier to kind of attack the big storylines and the names and stuff. I'm gonna be watching the corner 3 stuff because when Dallas is playing at their best, I mean there was one play that I was happy. It's rare that you get that much of a breakdown of it, but Stan Van Gundy pointed it out in real time, and then they showed a replay of it where Luka was dribbling to his right. He had Anthony Edwards behind him on his back in a pick and roll. He had Rudy Gobert right in front of him. I think it was Kleber that had set a screen for him at the top of the key. Luka was dribbling right, and he had someone in the right corner that looked like he might pass the ball to. And instead, he flung a pass to Derrick Jones Jr. in the left corner, hit him directly in his hands. He didn't have to move his hands. And Derrick Jones Jr. knocks down a three. He's been one of the most prolific corner three-point shooters in the league this postseason, despite the fact that defenses normally leave him alone because it's not what he's known for. And Stan pointed it out. It was shown on replay. Reggie Miller kind of was astounded at how perfect a pass it was. It was essentially a no-look pass. Right. And the fact that it was to the corner, the Celtics were the best corner three-point defense in basketball this season. They gave up the worst percentage, the best percentage, however you want to view it, defensively. And they have been like 10 percentage points better during the postseason. They've given up 23.5% on threes from the corner, that's supposed to be one of the easiest, most efficient shots in basketball, but they're really good. They close out to the corners really well. The Mavericks were the team that took the most corner threes in the league. Luka had by far the most corner three-point assists in the league. I think he had like 170 corner three-point assist opportunities, and the next closest guy had like 75 or 77 or something insane. So it's insane to consider it, but I think that kind of speaks to the health of Dallas's offense. If they're able to get a lot of looks like that, it's because teams are realizing, damn, we can't let Luka have his way in the lane. We have to show him bodies. We have to treat him almost like a Giannis or someone like that.
I appreciate it. I love when we have people on like you, because now I know what I'm going to be watching for in the game. Mm-hmm. It's like I'm going to be watching to see who wins the corner three battle, which is not something that I would have thought of before. But like you bringing it up, like, this is how you win. This is part of like Kurt Goldsberry is like based books on the corner three. Yeah. And like this could decide the game if the Celtics corner three defense can match up with Luka's ability to create them. That shot that you're talking about that Van Gundy broke down, I'll never forget that, because immediately after that shot happened, I got texts from two different friends who had played college basketball. Like, man, I could score 12 if I played for the Mavs. You just catch it and shoot wide open shots. And then I put my phone on silent. I was like, I'm not up for this foolishness. I'm not up for this foolishness. Like, I can only imagine how AT&T and Verizon's wires were tied up by people yelling about how they could catch and shoot wide open corner threes. Shut up, you bums.
Man, okay, so maybe you could do that part, but how many people can do what Luka was doing with that pass? Because just to watch it in slow motion and to see that he's not looking there, but he just instinctively knows where he's standing. He hasn't been on a team with these guys for that long. It
reminds me, and this is because it's the sport that I know best, it reminds me of football and being around guys like Ed Reed and guys who understand the game so much that, to the point that you were making, is like the normal pass when you have someone working in a pick and roll, the normal pass is to I guess it'd be the play side or the front side corner, and him whipping it around the back to the backside is because he anticipates that you are going to anticipate that he's going to go there. And that's fun. And all right, this is how you end up picking Dallas. This is how you do it. You get caught up in a moment. Get caught up in a moment, and you're like, can't nobody beat that man doing all that magic.
Yeah, but that's the thing, Dom. It doesn't have to look good, and I think that's what if Boston wins and they win in an easy 5-6 game fashion. Maybe 6 isn't easy, but that will be where I was wrong about this. Is that they haven't looked the part. And again, I know the Celtics would, if we were in court, they'd be like, objection, Your Honor. We smoked the rest of the East. We played who was in front of us. We didn't even have our fifth starter. But, I just think Dallas, they absolutely look the part. Their offense looks really unstoppable. And, and they, even when you know what's coming at you in the final minutes, like Jamal Crawford legit predicted that game winner that Luka was going to hit on Rudy Gobert to a T, down to the fact that he was going to kind of hop on one leg when he made it. It was like, okay, man, we know what's happening and we still can't do a damn thing about it. And, we'll see if Dallas can do that to Boston's defense. I'm not sure if they can, but if they can even do an inkling of that, I think they're going to get the series.
Can I say, though, but part of the reason why Luka's able to do that to so many teams is because of his ability to be a mismatch against just about anyone. And also his ability to find the defensive weak link. And that's the thing about the Celtics is they're going to be completely fine switching. So they're not going to be trying to hedge or trap or do anything that compromises the rest of their defense that eventually leads to the chain reaction that ends up with PJ Washington standing in the corner by himself shooting wide open threes. So like they're going to be okay. You screen, switch it to White. Okay, it ain't great, but he going to be all right. You switch it to Holiday. It ain't great, but he going to be all right. Same thing with Horford and Porzingis and obviously the Jays will be fine in it, as good as anyone can be. So like I guess that's how I would, if I were Joe Mazzulla, I'd approach it that way. It's like, look, nobody else gonna eat. Luka gonna have to go for 60 every night.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that, Chris. Do you think it's better to try and let Luka do his thing and take Kyrie out of the game, or is that a legitimate path for them?
I think it's worth considering. Yeah, I mean, I would rather have Luka do destruction from a scoring standpoint than to let him get everybody else involved and have Luka drop 30, which is essentially, I mean, that would be less than what he averaged during the season, by the way. So from that standpoint, it's not, again, I don't think you can give him the same looks for 5, 6, 7 games. I think that eventually if he gets used to that, he'll find another way to manipulate something. As Domonique said, he can bring whoever he wants to into the action, like he's a master manipulator from that standpoint. So I do suspect that Mazzulla has thoughts about all of this. He made a point in saying yesterday, we're not going to stop them from scoring. It's literally what they do best. He was saying, like, we have to be understanding of the fact that how one action impacts the next, meaning that, if he starts to see something and take advantage of it, that's when we're screwed. As far as like, that one guy is cheating in from the corner in particular and cheating toward the lane. That was how he made that pass to Derrick Jones Jr. Is it looked like Luka was dribbling to his right. And then because of that, you've got, I think it was Jaden McDaniels kind of cheating in from the corner. And if he can see that, it's the closest thing I've seen, I think, since LeBron was kind of in his prime. Of, if you watch some of those breakdowns from past finals, you can kind of make a play on LeBron or his team once or twice, but he kind of downloads it to memory, and then he realizes that you're going to play it a certain way, and he kind of flips it on you, and we'll use a head fake or we'll use a no look pass to kind of throw you off, and then he beats you the third time, and then it's on you to stop him after that because you're kind of at his whim. And I think Luka does a lot of the same stuff. Kyrie to some extent as well, but I just think Luka is such a great passer. So I do agree with you that I think that they would be better served trying to figure out Kyrie a little bit and trying to take away the options that Luka would have to pass to, because they can switch so well, because they've got guys that are big enough to theoretically guard Luka. He's still going to get 40 some nights in the series, but I do think
it's going to be an inefficient 40 with either Tatum or Brown on him.
Maybe.
I mean,
they're going to have to use so many bodies on the dude, because I don't think you're going to. He will get 40 if you just let one guy.
Right.
I also don't know that you want to wear down one guy defensively by having him do that and then ask that person to come out. I think the Celtics are going to need all hands on deck, but I'm so excited to watch it. Like, I want to get that across, because I'm not like thoroughly convinced Dallas has this. It could go either way. I think it's a team that peaked at the right time playing against the team that's been the best all season, and that you can't really ask for much more than that. I think going in, we were all at least potentially excited to see Denver and Boston, just because Denver, the most unstoppable player on the planet against the team that, is beating everybody easily. But, I'm pretty convinced at this point that Dallas probably would have taken out Denver too, just with how they were playing, how the level that Luka's at right now. I'm thrilled about this matchup and interested to see what comes of it.
What past this series, these teams seem to be in pretty interesting situations moving forward. Luka is going to be a Mav for a while. They got Kyrie, and we're able to acquire these guys on reasonable contracts via trade. Boston's got, they're sort of all in with the team that they have. This is the team they want for right now. Yeah. Who do you think is more set up for success long term, Dallas or Boston?
I mean, I think it's probably Boston, just because I haven't really closely studied the cap situations in Dallas. I know that they got Kyrie for a little bit longer. Kyrie's a little bit older than any of the key guys for Boston. So that's part of my answer too, I think. I also think that Boston has more established kind of two-way greatness, dominance, whatever you want to call it. Dallas, it was kind of a shock to us that they were this good defensively at the back end of the season. So we'll see from that standpoint. But I think that, as we said before, Boston's going to have more questions that they don't get it done here for all sorts of reasons. I mean, I don't think we're that far off from seeing some potential dominance on either side of the conference. We've yet to see the Knicks go all the way in terms of whatever they decide to do with all these draft picks that they have. They were, obviously very banged up to the point that they couldn't quite make it to the conference finals. They could decide to flip Randall into something. They have upside. And it's not to say that they'd be more talented than Boston, but they have considerable upside still. Jalen Brunson has kind of opened a whole new portal for them. And the flip side, in the Western Conference, there's another team in Texas that is pretty damn good, at least as far as the way they're set up with Victor Wembanyama. They've got cap space. They've got the ability to get better really quickly, because we watched Victor Wembanyama get a lot better really quickly to the point where it was a Rookie of the Year contest and then it just wasn't anymore. So it's not to say that Dallas won't be a factor going forward, but we just like we saw with Denver, it's really easy to think that this is going to be something that's sustainable easily for the next year, 2 years, 3 years. They're just going to be back there. We were all kind of surprised that Dallas even got here this season, and that is with the situation that maybe the defense isn't great. Maybe it won't be great going forward. We had all these questions about Luka and the shape he kept himself in. Like, maybe he will get hurt at some point. He really hasn't yet. But whether it's that or Kyrie or something else, I think I would bet sooner on Boston. Just the youth of that team, the fact that their guys have never really been, their top two guys at least have never really been an injury risk or anything like that. The fact that they've done this 6 times in 8 years to get to the conference finals, now a second finals trip. I don't necessarily see any team in the East eclipsing them in the next year or two. And so I would probably say that Boston, I would expect them to be able to get back to this point more readily than Dallas, just thinking about it off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think that, I think that's definitely the answer I would go with also. And I put on top of it, because I do believe that the Celtics are going to win, this might feel like some soft analysis, but there is some value in my mind to getting there and getting it done. And if they get it done, I think that feels a whole lot different. And I know we are in this era where we're saying that the dynasty is dead in basketball because of the last 6 years and whatever, and
Sure.
the adjustments to the salary cap that seems to be a real thing in basketball now that it never used to be. Like, all of those things are happening, but what hasn't changed is the East still stinks. And I get you, Chris. A lot of people can do a lot of things. This could happen, that could happen, but you don't need no ifs in the West. There are no ifs needed. There are real teams and real stars over there, and the Mavs may not get back anytime soon, and I do think that the Celtics, it's unlikely that the Celtics don't find their way back a couple more times, considering what the East looks like.
I agree wholeheartedly. It's kind of, I mean, it goes back to how disappointing the playoffs were for, if you were looking, I'm just someone that always wants to see the best teams challenged. Right. I don't need to see them beaten necessarily, but you want to feel like, man, like they really endured the test of talent, time, whatever. And I think that they already have shown the test of time, just from the standpoint that they keep getting back to it about this level. They were only 1 game away from having done that last year as well, after falling behind 3-0. So, and maybe if Tatum doesn't twist his ankle at the beginning of Game 7, they win that too. But this is a team that has already shown that they've got the mettle to make it back. It's a team that has shown to be smart. Like, it's not necessarily easy to just replace Ime Udoka with a guy that's never been a head coach before. They've gotten back with a coach that, that had not been a head coach prior to all that, and that have changed a little bit, with an executive that had the courage to kind of go and try to improve a team that was already really good by going to get Porzingis, to go get Drew Holiday these were not necessarily easy calls. I don't think, I was critical a little bit of the idea to go get Porzingis and to trade Robert Williams and, potentially deplete the center position because Porzingis has an injury history. And now they're kind of going to see like how much did that matter ultimately to not have him when we all could have assumed that maybe Porzingis would have injury problems this year. So they might win despite all that. And I think that would tell you that this is a damn good team. We know that already, but now they have a chance to kind of stamp their name in history and immortalize themselves. So I'm just really excited for it. And I think to your point also, we always say, man, the writing is on the wall about this team. They can't win. They can't win because this happened and this happened and this happened. We did it with Denver. We've done it with everybody else. We've done it with Boston. And now if Boston wins, like those questions go away forever. Maybe people will say at some point they should have won even more than the one title that they would get this year. But titles are hard to get, man. And,
we did it with Golden State before they won their first one. And that looks really dumb in hindsight. All right, Chris, I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. Great show. Thank you to Chris Herring for joining us. Also, thank you to the great Vanilla Snack Charlie Kravitz for doing an awesome job today, and all of our wonderful producers who have some big decisions on their hands today. Brian, Megan, Serafina, Kevin, and Tez. We out.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.